Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. Today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Anthony Pierce. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. So let's go ahead and jump right into your story. And how about we start with your education? Share with us where you went to school, maybe what your educational background is.
Yeah, so I have a unique start as far as education as relates to this industry. I started out at North Carolina A&T State University, and there I started out in biology. And no one ever told me that you have to learn about plants and cells and that kind of thing early on before you get to the body. So I really wasn't that interested in the first part of biology. So I ended up leaving A&T and finishing up my degree actually in business. I went online as at the University of Phoenix, and they had a Raleigh campus. And so while I was finishing up my business degree, I became a paramedic. So that's how I got into healthcare. I was a paramedic working on a business degree and just kind of continued that route for a good little while. So that's my educational background.
Oh, wow. You do have an interesting start. Wow. So,
Yeah.
so how long were you a paramedic?
So I was a paramedic for 13 years. I was the youngest supervisor to work in Durham County. And actually that exposed me to clinical research because we did an investigational drug trial on a blood product trial called Polyheme. And it's public information now. It's on the market. So nothing being disclosed that shouldn't be. That introduced me to clinical research. So they tapped me to be the liaison between the study coordinator at Duke and the paramedics for the county. And so they taught me how to enroll patients and do randomizations and about drug storage, drug accountability, and so forth, and what good clinical practices were at that time. So that was my introduction to research. And then with my healthcare background, I was able to kind of get familiar with what research was all about, and it piqued my interest early on.
Oh, wow. So from that point, like, how did you, I guess, transition all the way over into the clinical research space?
Yep. And so after being the liaison for the county with the investigational drug product or blood product, there was a pilot program that Parexel was putting on that was taking people with healthcare backgrounds and teaching them how to be a CRA. My brother, who had already been in the industry about 7 years, he told me about the program. He said, look, I think you'll be a good fit. You have the healthcare background, being a paramedic and being familiar with medicine and being now that you're introduced to what clinical research is, I think it'd be good if you came on board and took the pilot program. Well, it was a 5-week long interview. So it wasn't a full-fledged program where you're hired from day one. It was a stipend that you would get at the conclusion. So you had to keep your day job and manage the 5-week long CRA1. It was called Site Manager in Training, or SMIT for short. And in that program, we were there from 9 to 5 every day for 5 weeks straight. And you weren't an employee at that point. So you were basically in a 5-week long interview. So then I would do that during the day and work as a paramedic at night, and then flip flop. And then at the conclusion, they interviewed those who were very successful in the program. We started out with 18, and we ended up with 9 that was offered positions. And I was the only male in that program that was accepted to be a CRA1 for Parexel. And then the program, they refined it and created it and made it a standing, ongoing training, site manager in training, where they teach you how to be a CRA1. And that's how I got into the industry. So I finally said goodbye to being a paramedic and came on board as a CRA1. And the program at that time was designed where we would come in the first 6 months, you were with a co-monitor. So I co-monitored with some very bright individuals, some very experienced staff, and went on visits with them, and they kind of continued to teach me the ropes about being a CRA. And then once I successfully completed, they recommended if I could function on my own, and I got my own site, and I was doing visits on my own with some other mentoring and guidance, and then, continue to progress, and the rest is really history at that point.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that that's how the training program started. Because, now it's like totally different.
Yep, it is. Yeah. And even when I was at Parks, it was funny because the revamp of the program to maybe what it is today, I was in on those discussions that kind of talk about what I went through, what was helpful, what wasn't so much, what was kind of realistic as far as monitoring on site and kind of what skill sets, and even down to the selection of candidates of who would be ideal fit. I was involved in that discussion as well, because when I was in the pilot program, they pulled people from all different types of backgrounds, even people with no healthcare experience, because they wanted to see, is this program strong enough to teach someone without the background how to be a CRA? Long story short, found out that was probably setting them up not to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
No healthcare background at all, or no research background at all. And so we looked at the ideal candidates at that time was either those that had a healthcare background, whether it was a study coordinator or something else, or those that had been in the industry, like working in data management or some other department where they were exposed to clinical research data. And those made better fits of being a CRA than those with absolutely no healthcare experience at all or research experience.
Wow, that makes sense. But then for you to go to 5 weeks without getting paid, because now it's a paid position.
Right.
But people are complaining about that entry level salary, and I'm thinking, what if you didn't get what if you didn't get paid?
I still remember we got what is it? I think it was $1,500 stipend at the conclusion. So if you stayed there the 5 weeks, they gave you a one-time $1,500 check that said, "Thank you for enduring to the end. Here's your check." And you may not get the job, or you may just be sent on your way. And those of that was extended opportunities was like, yes, it was worth it. I got the $1,500. But of course, that didn't pay the bills for 5 weeks, but you just suffer through it.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you said this. So for the people that are complaining because they got offered 60, 65, 70, 75, now they know they need to shut up.
When I started, the entry salary for us was $50,000, and we had $1,000 retention bonus. So you got $51,000 when you first started back then. That was in 2000 and how long have I been doing this? 2007.
Okay.
It was now CRAs get a lot more than that, and at least a lot of companies give a lot more than that, depending on where you at and what the size organization you work for.
But it's still come a long way. So now, regardless of what you've been offered, like nobody can complain because you started in a program where they weren't offering anything. So I definitely want everybody to hear that, because a lot of people come to me and they're like, I just can't take a pay cut. But if this is something you really want to do, you got to do it, right?
And that was the thing that I share with people early on as well, because you may come in as a pay cut, but if you stick to it, you will exceed your salary expectations over time.
Yep.
Basically, you come in, you prove yourself, and I guarantee you that what you wanted to make in a career, you can do it in this industry.
Yep, I agree. And it's not like it take a long time either, right? It's not one of those industries where you need like decades and decades of experience to make a lucrative career.
Right.
So I agree. Wow. So once you officially became, an official monitor for Par Excel, then share a little bit more about where you went from there. Like, how long were you at Par Excel, how your career progressed and things like that.
Okay, good deal. So at Par Excel during the entry level career, I stayed there. I think it was 3 years. And before I left, I was a CRA 2. So I had gotten the promotion. Initially, we had to work in the office full time until we were promoted to a CRA 2 during that time. And then that allowed us to work from home full time because we were already traveling, having some autonomy, being able to get our work done, or prove that we can do our work and travel without having someone kind of watch us. Mm-hmm. So I did that. And then I reached a point in my career where I said, the only way I know how to do it is this one CRO's way, RXL way at the time. And I said, I know there's more than way to do this job, and I want to be a well-rounded CRA. So I started to branch out and look at other CROs that were doing just as well, if not better, than the current company I was working in. And I decided to take that leap and experience being a CRA with another CRO. And I landed a position at another CRO. I think it was Icon at the time, and worked there. There were different systems. There were pros, there were cons, but there's never any one particular CRO that's perfect. So you may be lacking in the side of technology at one CRO and not in the other one, or you may be lacking in the area of site selections. Like you may be traveling all over the United States versus being in a region. Right. You may be multiple protocols instead of being one or two. So I was able to experience kind of a little bit of everything. I know what it's like to travel the West Coast and all different time zones, and then having metrics where I'm traveling every week, Tuesday through Thursday or Monday through Thursday for most of the year, being a road warrior. And then I got to experience different systems that work well, some that did not, and having all the technology at my disposal, from down to a great computer to cell phones to hotspots to CTMS system that help write the report for you, to all types of different things. But more importantly, I got exposed to different therapeutics and dealing with different people. So that afforded me the opportunity where ParXL actually reached back out to me and said, hey, Anthony, when you left, everybody loved your style. You were definitely great at what you were doing, and you helped prepare people and other entry-level CRAs before you left, and we want to bring you back as a manager of CRAs. So I left and came back to ParXL and worked as a CRA manager. Grooming, that's when we developed the CMA program. And they said, we're going to have a different model. It was called I forgot the name of the model now, but a model where we would have an in-house person be the primary point of contact for sites, so that as all the CRAs are traveling, they can never really interact with their sites unless they get back to the office, have an office day, returning voicemails or emails or whatever. And sites used to complain about that. And so this company decided to address that and have what they call a clinical monitoring associate, be the primary point of contact, be an expert on the protocol. So if I was the doctor, said, hey, I have a question about this protocol, somebody will pick up the phone on the other end or be able to return my call within 24 to 48 hours. And that was the CMA program. So I was a manager of CRAs that were traveling and then CMAs that were not traveling, kind of a blended approach to managing the site. And so I managed a very large team, I think 28 at the time, but we interviewed and grew that group from 25 when I first started to 125 in 6 weeks. And then we opened up an office in Argentina where we grew that group, interviewing Spanish speaking and even Portuguese speaking CMAs for another group to grow the office in Argentina. So during that opportunity, I was able to get exposed to having a hybrid role where I had direct reports as well as project team oversight. So I had a little bit of a hybrid role. So there was a large project that I worked on where I managed all the staff that was assigned to that project. So the clinical lead, the CRAs, and the CMAs, and it just made for, better continuity of and oversight for that particular program for them to be successful if one person managed all of the team. So that was a great opportunity for me because I got a chance to see what it was like on the project side. I did that for a number of years, and then the company decided to change gears and the direction of the company decided to change. So that left the door open for another opportunity for me to continue being a manager, but at another CRO. So I took that leap. Then I was managing all CRAs. And then over time, I started managing another hybrid. They heard about my hybrid experience. So I started managing the leads as well as the CRAs, and then being more involved with the project team. So I really enjoyed that niche. That was kind of where I landed. Quality wasn't attractive to me, but managing the entire team was. And that's why I stayed literally for the last few years of my career. And then up until now. And now I'm on the sponsor side, so the actual drug maker. And I came in there in an oversight role where I oversaw the clinical monitoring team of the CRO that we were contracted with. Mm-hmm. So we contracted with a large CRO at the time, and their CRAs and CTMs and so forth, they had their own reporting structure, but I was responsible for overseeing that process because I knew what it was like to be a CRA, and I knew what it was like to manage a team as a clinical lead or clinical team manager. They got different names for them now. And I could go out to sites and function very well as well. So that was a great role in oversight from a sponsor angle. So it was totally different. But what made it attractive is I knew what the CRAs were going through. So whenever a request was in for an additional visit, or they were meeting resistance from a site, I knew what that CRA was dealing with because I probably have dealt with it myself. And so it allowed us to mitigate issues a lot easier. And then, of course, being promoted through the ranks in the sponsor side, now I oversee the entire global program. So where I have we have a small team. It's about 3 of us that oversee all the clinical trials that are under the company. And so my function is kind of overseeing the CRO and being the subject matter expert globally, as well as overseeing what they call expanded access programs, where we're actually giving the drug to those patients that can benefit, even though it's not commercially available at this time. So I've been there the last, 3 years now. I've been enjoying it. I don't have any direct reports now, but maybe in the future as a team grows. So that's my career progression and how it kind of worked for me.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Wow. So how long were you, I try to keep track of it, but how long were you monitoring before you moved over into management?
I monitored for 5.5 years, and then I became a manager.
Okay. So that's reasonable then for people to be able to expect to move into management, whether that's a line manager, CTM project manager, what have you, within 5 years then, right?
Yeah. And I always say the general rule of thumb is at that 5-year mark, you become a senior CRA for a lot of companies. You have to make a decision. What do you want to do next? Do you want to go the project side and be project manager, a clinical team manager, or clinical trial manager? Or do you want to manage personnel, be a CRA line manager? Or do you want to go to another department altogether? But you have enough experience that you're marketable, and you have enough awareness of how clinical trials work that you can take a gamble and go into whatever side of the industry that you want to. So I always tell people that that's your pivotal point where you decide which route do you want to take, because now you're not entry level anymore.
Right. And that makes sense. So what was, I guess, appealing for you for like the line management side and the direction that you chose?
The site manager and training program. I felt that it was important for entry level staff that want to get involved in this industry to have a good mentor, a good foundation, or somebody who actually cares, and to help them be successful. And so I wanted to give back. So that was my decision to go into line management versus project side, because I saw a lot of CRAs that didn't have the greatest managers. And I even had a few here and there as well. But I felt like, if they had the right coach, the right mentor, and you can be completely transparent with them on things that they're doing well, but also more importantly, the things that are not doing well, most people would do the right thing. I think the problem that we have is the uncomfortable conversations when you have to have with an employee that's not doing well. Not many people are going to have them, but if you tell them, most people are going to do better. You say you're not doing well in this particular area, the average employee is going to fix it. Those that are not, of course, you manage them out of the organization. So I started as a unique skill set that I had with dealing with people, and really caring about the success of somebody else other than myself. So I stayed into the line manager side of things. And that's what made me go that route.
Awesome. Awesome. That's exciting. So now, with your role, I know you said you don't have any direct reports. You're not doing any monitoring. So, well, first, let me ask you: do you think you would ever go back to monitoring?
Probably not monitoring. I think I would go back into oversight. Like my role now, the only time I go to a site and actually do any monitoring is if it's a problem.
Okay.
Opportunity on the sponsor side to go to Brazil year before last, before pre-COVID. And now that's very interesting because I saw how other countries monitor. And Portuguese is not really that hard of a language to pick up on. So I was able to see how things were done, look at the source, and tackle an issue that we were dealing with at the time. And so I did get exposed to monitoring because you never really lose it unless it's been several years. And so I kind of like the role that I'm in now because I can go on site and do what we call oversight visits, where I'm basically going to check behind the CRA, see how they're doing and how their monitoring practices have been, without necessarily doing an audit per se. But I get a chance to interact with the investigators regularly because they're giving us feedback. And sometimes my role has always been to help the CRAs out, even though I don't manage the CRAs now. I do get the opportunity to go to bat for the CRA, because if you've asked, I know many of you that probably watching this program have tried their hardest, sent emails, made phone calls, escalated appropriately, et cetera, and they still will not respond. Then you get the sponsor involved, hoping they're going to help you. And some of the sponsors do, but some don't. But for me, I already know the due diligence that the CRA has done, having the background of CRA. So I usually go to bat for those CRAs as if they reported to me, make sure that they get what they need in a timely fashion, that we improve that communication. And so that's kind of where my role lands now. And so it keeps my feet wet in monitoring. So I like that approach versus going out every day to go monitor. I enjoyed it, but I think that season is over.
But it sounds like now you got the best of both worlds, though, because you can kind of dibble and dabble a little bit if you want to, but then you don't really have to. Wow. So that's good to know that there is an oversight role out there on the sponsor side, that people can, if for the people that are trying to figure out what's next. Because I always wonder how they handle it on that side. So that's good to know.
Yeah. And if I can, I guess, provide a little bit more on that. So like a lot of sponsors have CRAs that work for them directly, and their role can be different depending on the company. An example, some sponsors handle monitoring internally. So they hire their own CRAs, just like the CRO has, to go out and monitor the trials regularly, and they report into a clinic, et cetera. But other sponsors, and even like ours, we hire CRAs, but their role is not to go and monitor. Their role is actually go and oversee the CRAs that are at these sites. So you're the sponsor CRA, but you're really in an oversight role, oversight and functioning in an oversight capacity. So the CRAs that are assigned to the study will reach out to you for as a subject matter expert, or reach out to you if there is an issue at a particular site and you both would tackle it. And then you may even have to go in and go behind a CRA where there was quality concerns and do some remonitoring to see to what extent the quality concerns were. So different sponsors, they may title it CRA, but your functions may be different, which is also a pretty attractive role on the sponsor side.
Wow, that's good to know. So there's a lot of opportunities then, like you said, once you hit that 5-year mark, I mean, it's up to you, right? You can go in any direction.
That's right, indeed.
Wow. So out of all your roles, all the years you've monitored, what would you say would be your most challenging experience?
I think my most challenging experience was being a CRA manager and having a manager that probably shouldn't have been in the industry. Because, and the reason why I say that was probably my most challenging experience was because I'm passionate about seeing someone else succeed. Every manager who goes on to be successful transition the focus from themselves to those that report to them, help them get to an area. So you would love to see your coworkers become managers just like you. So you want to give them everything they need to become a manager. But there's some managers that are intimidated by that. And I think I faced that real firsthand, where I had several direct reports in a hybrid capacity. And this particular manager did not, came from a different background where she had never really had direct reports, but was kind of thrown into the manager role because they kind of got rid of a particular segment of people and either promoted them to managers or project managers. And so it left a challenge, and it was all about years. So if you have 10 years experience and you're a senior manager, and you have other managers that report into you, and it was probably the most challenging part in my career, because despite the efforts to trying to foster a relationship with this particular manager, there was just no interest on one side. And so that made it a bit challenging because, of course, the oversight comes into play. And whenever executive leadership would reach out to me, of course, there was always seen as though, well, why did they reach out to you? Why didn't they reach out to me? I'm like, I can't control what executive leadership does, but they knew I had come from large CROs, had a broad experience background. And so they reached out to me as a resource, to pick my brain. And I welcomed it, always have. Yeah. That was probably the most challenging situation in my career, even to this day. And, that was a situation where I needed to get out of that situation. And thankfully, things got better because there's a biblical reference where you make your enemies your footstools. And what I mean by that is there came a time in my career currently on the sponsor side, well, I had to make a decision where we were going to go with the company where the manager was present on the other side of the table, and I had to make the decision. Eyes lit up like, I can't believe this. I can't believe Anthony is actually having to decide if we're going to get this multi-million-dollar contract or not. And I had no malice or ill intent, but it was an example where, sometimes things happen where everything happens for a reason. Right. Sometimes you get in a situation you never want to burn any bridges because this industry is big but small. You never know when you're going to meet the person again. And this particular manager met me on the other side of the table where they were trying to convince me to accept or give.
I lost you for a second.
Uh-oh, am I back?
Yep, I can hear. You're moving now. I can hear you. So the last part I heard was the industry is big but small.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the industry is big but small. So you never know when you're going to come in contact with your former colleagues or former managers. So the key is to never burn any bridges, despite how the relationship was or what took place. It's still always important to just end whatever, when you sever your ties with whatever organization as you move around, because you never know when you're going to come back and see them again, or they'll come back to you again.
So true. So true. Wow. So what advice would you give to people that may be in a situation like that now, where they have a challenging manager or direct, person that they report to?
I think transparency is key, and documentation is key,
Okay.
and focusing on things that are within your control. There's some decisions that are made, and I learned as a manager that we can't always share with the direct report. Managers go through stressful situations as well, in which they have to make decisions that they may not like. But it's a business decision that somebody above them have instructed them to carry out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem fair. And I think whenever you're dealing with a manager or someone where there's a conflict, I think the key is to be as transparent as you possibly can. Of course, keeping everything professional, and document and recap in the discussion, and look for ways in which you both can compromise. Set a target. And then if you exhausted all efforts, of course, keep manager plus one in the loop. Oftentimes, that's when things get a little tricky. But if there's one thing I've learned from my experience is you probably want to involve manager plus one in earlier than later, because oftentimes before things become a performance concern, the manager plus one never knew. And so at that point, it makes the appearance as if you're only bringing the manager plus one into play because now there's a performance concern, when reality is you've been dealing with this for a year now. You just kind of try to deal with it on your own without getting support. And then it paints a negative light into you as the employee, when the reality is there's other issues that are going on here that should have been addressed earlier.
Right. And explain what you mean when you say, just for the people that don't know, when you say manager plus one.
Sorry. So your manager's manager. So in most all organizations now, there's the open door policy. So it's highly encouraged to get to know your manager's manager. Right. And so forth, but within reason. Now, there's still things that you shouldn't do. Don't call the CEO of the company just because the CEO told you you can, unless they, unless it really is appropriate. Right. But oftentimes, whenever there's a local departmental issue, some team members feel that, well, the director of global projects said I can call anytime. But you have to ask yourself, does this individual that you want to contact, are they in the know of what happens at the local level? And if the answer is no, then that's probably not the most appropriate person to contact for your issue. So it may just be your manager's manager.
All right, that makes sense. That's good to know, because I've spoken to several people who feel like they are in this type of situation and they don't want to burn any bridges. They don't know where to turn, but then they also feel like they're kind of stuck in their career, because how can they progress if this person is kind of, the determining factor, and they just feel stuck and they don't know what to do. So that's very good advice. That's really good to know. So what would you say? I don't want people to think that, it's all challenges. So what would you say would be your best experience as a CRA, or even in another role, but your most memorable, best experience?
I think my most memorable is when I saw a drug on TV that was on the market, that I worked on that trial. And, oftentimes as a CRA, you may not stay on a trial for very many years, But if you stay in the industry long enough, you'll start to see drugs come to market that you've worked on. Even though not many drugs actually make it to market, but that's something that you'll remember. So like one in particular was this program at Park Hill where I had the hybrid role. I managed all the staff that was on the project. And it was a challenging project because it was those of you that may not know, it's called no loss to follow, which means if a patient was ever on this study, you had to know where they were up until they died by any means necessary, whether you looked in a newspaper or hired somebody to go knock on their door or whatever. You could not say, we can't find this patient. They went to jail, you had to know about it. So anyway, that was a huge undertaking. And we were able to work on that project and deliver. And the client wanted to get rid of the CRO altogether because of our performance. But we had what was called a rejuvenation meeting where and this kind of goes back to a point I made earlier, where we all came together, we put it all on the table. We talked about what worked, what wasn't working. Then we brought the sponsor in and had the same thing, same conversation. The sponsor talked about what worked, what didn't work, got a chance to hear from us what our challenges were. And really, we realized that the communication was the problem because we weren't communicating what challenges were, and the sponsor wasn't receiving the information they needed to know. To them, it just looked like we weren't meeting the expectations, right? Because it was so it was managing that client relationship. And we realized that once you talk to the CRA that's actually on site and they could articulate what they dealt with, you saw that it was a bigger problem than what we anticipated. And we worked through it and we fixed those problems and we delivered that trial, and that trial was submitted and that drug went to market, and people are taking that drug even today. That was probably my most memorable moment. And I started on that trial as a manager. But there's been projects I've worked on in the past as a CRA 1 that are now on the market.
Wow.
More, which is kind of funny because I feel like I'm getting older. I'm seeing lots of drugs that I've worked on. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that drug. That was a crazy trial. Or yes, that was a great trial.
That's funny. Wow, you're right. I don't think there was maybe one drug that I've seen that's been approved that I've worked on. But it was also because when I got to the study, they were like towards the end of, everything. Anyways, it was like they were already at phase 3 and it had been going on, I think, for like maybe 5 years or so. So yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that. How many drugs we actually have worked on that we get to see approved. But that is a rewarding thing. So yeah. Wow. So I know we've covered a lot today, and you have shared an amazing journey. And I've gotten a lot of different takeaways. Communication being one, whether that be with your manager, your team, what have you. But what would you say would be the final thought or the one piece of advice or the takeaway that you would want to leave with people that are hoping to become a CRA, or even the people that are CRAs, but they're trying to advance and develop their careers? What would be like your the final thoughts that you would leave with them?
I guess I would look at it in 2.1, set goals. When you come into the industry, everyone wants to be promoted and continue to progress, et cetera. But you have to set realistic goals, and we use the acronym SMART. But if you set a goal, map out a plan on how to achieve that goal. So if you want to become a CRA 1, then you do things like you're doing now. Figure out what does it take, what are the backgrounds to become a CRA, what avenues can I take to become a CRA, and then let it be known. Whether it's applying to different companies, interviewing, and so forth, prepare, for the role of CRA. And then once you become a CRA, don't stop there. Set your next goal whether it's to be exposed to multiple therapeutics, whether it's to be able to become a CRA2 over time, because sometimes everything is not necessarily black and white. Just because you have 2 years experience don't mean you're going to get promoted. And I think that's probably the number one misconception, that time is the determining factor when it's really only one factor. It's what you've been exposed to, and you don't want to limit yourself. So especially early on in your career, if you want to be that person that says yes to the things that others are saying no to, because it shows you and others that you are willing to take on challenging roles and tasks because you really want to know what this industry entails. Yeah. And people see it, but keep track of it. You need to be able to articulate what studies you've been exposed to, what were your role on, and some of the things that you were challenging, things that you've overcome, because time flies by and there's studies that you may work on or visits you may conduct that you forget about over time, but you want to be able to articulate that. So write those things down, continue to do that. And then also, as you progress in your career, no matter what role you get to, you got to set another goal. Don't stop setting goals. So if you want to be a manager, write down what are the steps to become a manager. You have to be functioning as a manager before you actually get the role. So, and what does that mean? Well, what are the skill sets a manager should have? Well, they have to have some mentoring skill set. They have to pay attention to detail. They have to be metrics driven. They have to have a quality focus about themselves. So as you are trying to become a manager, then we want to see you working in those areas now. So if a task comes up where you get a chance to mentor an entry-level CRA, jump on it. Yes, it's busy. Yes, there's a lot going on, but you're looking at your ultimate goal, which is to be a manager. And so most people want to see you actually functioning in the role before you actually are given. And then last but not least, work-life balance. In this industry, what will happen, and this is to those who are in the industry now. We talked about this a little bit in the beginning. There will come a point in your career where the money or how much you make won't matter as much as it did when you first started. And what I mean by that is this industry pays very well over time once you get experience, et cetera. But there will come a point where the recruiters are going to call you every day and they're going to offer you more money, $20,000 sign-on bonus, I think is what I was told yesterday. And, a lot more to what you're currently making to come on to the company. And you're going to reach a point in your career where that money no longer matters as much as it used to. It's everything else, the work-life balance. Where my site's going to be located? How many protocols am I going to be on? What is the organizational structure? Are there any bonus incentives? How well is the company doing now? What is their retention efforts that they do to retain top staff? Because I've went to a company where they paid very well, had all the technology in the world, but lacked when it came to knowing the role of a CRO because they were just branching out. And so they expected me to come in and basically fix all of that and pay me very well to do it. But it wasn't worth it. And that's probably the easiest way to say it. And so to all of those that are in the industry, I think is continue to set goals and know that money isn't everything. Look at everything else that matters to you, from family to career progression, and so forth. And then when you find that company where it meets those other objectives and maybe not the salary piece, figure out what's important to you, and you'll probably stay in certain places a lot longer because the money will come. And if it's taking care of the bills that you need to do and your financial goals that you're trying to make, then and all the other things are there, it's probably a good idea to stay because you're going to get offers because you're worthy of it. And Jasmine, hats off to you and your career. I mean, watching you come in entry level and now doing podcasts and YouTube channels and helping others. That's the way you reach back. And I feel like that right there is pivotal and it definitely speaks highly of what you think about other people. So obviously you would make a great manager because you're already doing it, now. So thank thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. I think you have an amazing journey. And some stuff I knew, but a lot of stuff I didn't even know. And I'm even more impressed. So thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem at all.